Hey, I get it. News headlines can be terrifying. When you hear the words Iran, Israel, and nuclear in the same sentence, it's easy to imagine the worst case scenario. But let me calm your nerves. A nuclear war between these two nations is highly unlikely, and I have strong reasons to believe this. However, in the unimaginable case it happens, the map of the Middle East will change forever. Israel might be wiped off the world map. Let's dive into why both of these outcomes are possible yet improbable. For decades, Iran and Israel have had one of the most bitter rivalries in geopolitics. It's more than just a political spat, it's a deep rooted ideological clash. Iran's regime, particularly after the 1979 revolution, sees Israel as illegitimate and a threat to regional stability. Israel, on the other hand, has always perceived Iran as a threat to its very existence, especially with Iran's nuclear ambitions. Now, don't get me wrong, these countries have engaged in proxy wars, cyber attacks, and covert operations. The shadow war has been going on for years, with Iran backing groups like Hezbollah and Hamas to target Israeli interests, while Israel has carried out numerous airstrikes against Iranian targets in Syria and even inside Iran itself. But none of these have escalated into full-blown direct warfare, let alone nuclear conflict. Why? Because both nations understand the risks. Let's get one thing straight. Israel has nuclear weapons, and while it's not officially acknowledged, experts estimate Israel has between 80 to 100 nuclear warheads. Iran, on the other hand, is suspected to be on the verge of acquiring nuclear capabilities, but isn't quite there yet. Now, here's the crucial part. Both countries understand that a nuclear war would be devastating beyond imagination. Any nuclear exchange wouldn't just affect the immediate targets, it would ripple across the entire region. Cities would be turned into ashes, millions of people would die, and the fallout would reach beyond borders, making large parts of the Middle East uninhabitable. It would also drag the global superpowers, namely the US and Russia, into the fray, possibly igniting World War III. There is a well-known theory called mutual assured destruction. It's the idea that neither side would risk launching a nuclear attack because they know the retaliation would lead to their own destruction. Israel and Iran are well aware of this. But what would happen if it came to that? Imagine, for instance, Iran launches a nuclear strike on Tel Aviv. Israel's response would be swift and catastrophic. Tehran and other Iranian cities would be obliterated in retaliation. And here's the kicker. Israel's small geographic size makes it incredibly vulnerable. A couple of well-placed nuclear strikes could essentially erase Israel from the map, as there is little space for civilians to flee or for the military to reposition itself. Iran's leadership is many things, but suicidal isn't one of them. Despite their aggressive rhetoric, the Iranian regime knows that launching a nuclear attack on Israel would lead to its own destruction. Iran's supreme leader and the Revolutionary Guard are aware of Israel's second strike capabilities, meaning that even if Iran hit Israel first, Israel would still have the capacity to retaliate with nuclear weapons from submarines or other hidden locations. Israel's strategy has always been about deterrence. The country's defense doctrine hinges on making the cost of any attack on its soil unacceptably high for its enemies. In fact, this is why Israel has focused so much on intelligence operations like the Stuxnet cyber attack on Iran's nuclear facilities to delay Iran's nuclear ambitions without resorting to full-scale war. Let's talk geopolitics for a minute. The US is Israel's staunchest ally and has vowed to protect the nation. In any real threat of nuclear war, the US would step in before things escalated to that level. Likewise, the international community, including European powers, Russia, and China, would likely exert immense pressure on both nations to avoid a nuclear exchange. There is another critical factor. Iran is not completely isolated. The country has strategic alliances with Russia and China, which wouldn't want a nuclear war in the region either. These countries have too much at risk. Oil prices would skyrocket, global markets would crash, and the ripple effects would harm their own economies and security interests. So, even if tensions escalate, the probability of diplomatic intervention is high, whether through back-channel negotiations, sanctions, or direct military threats. Global powers have a vested interest in preventing a nuclear catastrophe between these two nations. While the shadow war between Iran and Israel is likely to continue through proxy forces, cyber attacks, and conventional military strikes, the chances of a direct nuclear confrontation are slim. The stakes are too high for both countries and for the world. However, if, and it's a massive if, nuclear weapons are used, Israel's geographic vulnerability could lead to a scenario where the country is essentially wiped out. The small size of Israel, combined with its dense population centers, makes it particularly susceptible to a first strike. In contrast, Iran, with its vast size and dispersed population, might survive a first strike but would still face unimaginable destruction in a retaliatory attack. Look, the chances of Iran and Israel engaging in a nuclear war are incredibly low. Both sides have too much to lose and they know it. But that doesn't mean you should ignore the ongoing tensions. The real threats lie in the continued proxy conflicts and the potential for one side to miscalculate, leading to an unintended escalation. So while the headlines might seem scary, remember that cooler heads tend to prevail when the alternative is mutual annihilation. But it's always smart to stay informed, because in the world of geopolitics, things can change in the blink of an eye. If you want to know how no country has the power to conquer Iran, then you should watch this video. Thanks for watching.